afternoon. This is Richard Massey, editor of Civil Plus Structural Engineer, and it's an exciting day for me. On the other line on this interview, I have Bill McConnell, who is CEO of Vertex, which is a major engineering, multidiscipline engineering firm that has been bursting at the seams with growth. They've got exciting products and programs going on all over the country. And we're going to talk to him about his efforts to, among other things, turn Vertex into a billion-dollar company by 2030, which is seems like an aggressive goal, but if anyone can do it, I think it would be Bill McConnell. And joining us also is Lisa Derner, who is the Chief Marketing Officer for Vertex. How you doing there, Lisa?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. So, Bill, I got your written response to my questionnaire a day or two ago, and I went through that, and boy, oh boy, you've got some serious thoughts about any question that comes your way. And looking back at the questionnaire in general, what did you get out of it when you went through all these questions and answered them?
Well, I thought it was going to be a simple exercise and take a few minutes, but you asked some really deep questions, which was great. And I had a flight to Ireland, and that gave me about 10 hours to really focus in on the answers, and it took all of that. And I thought it was great stuff. I think you brought up some interesting points about leadership transition and current challenges that the industry faces, and kind of talking about both forensics and design work and construction work, and how what are the trends in the industry, and how each perform in a bear market and bull market. So it was great for me as well.
Good, good. Well, you know, one of the things, and I thought your answer was fantastic. You know, I did my undergraduate and my master's degree back to back in my 20s. But then when I read your answer about your education and all the degrees that you've obtained over the years, and you're pursuing a PhD as we speak, how has that example kind of bled into your company, especially with the lifelong learning process that the firm has set up? I mean, it seems like you're really building a big, deep backbench of heavy hitters with their PhDs and advanced degrees. And how is that helping the long-term growth and success of your firm?
Well, that's a key differentiator for us. The scare that AEC companies have when they don't grow is that you have an aging workforce that chews up profit margin because their wages typically outpace rate increases. So it's kind of a death sentence over the long term. And so we tried to create a strategy where we could have rate increases commensurate with salary increases, and have folks, as they age into the workforce, become multi-degreed and eventually become expert witnesses, and have the ability to teach and write, and become thought leaders in whatever discipline that they practice. So it's really a long-term strategy. It's a 30 to 40-year outlook, where it's an absolute win-win, where we don't need to, like you said, you did a back-to-back. I think Lisa Derner also did that, maybe with her MBA. I forget if it was back-to-back, but it's very difficult for someone in their 20s to knock out multiple advanced degrees. But when you take a 20 to 30-year horizon, it's not overly daunting. And we're talking about a class a semester, if that, or maybe 2 classes a year. And then once you get into your, let's say, 40s, you have degrees, and into your 50s, you have multiple degrees. And then that helps with becoming a testifying expert, where you can demand significant rates. And it's really, and then, like I mentioned, also getting into teaching and writing, and multiple publications in various media formats really helps the company, and it helps the individual. and that's kind of the long-term goal. And we see it as a differentiator. We understand that learning is going to be different in 10 years than it is today, as it's different today as it was 10 years ago. A lot of people are going to hop on board with the distance learning. It's not going to be only a handful of engineering schools and construction management universities with construction management degrees that offer distance learning. We're going to have hundreds, and everyone's probably going to jump on board. So we know that we want to be first to market in this differentiator and really practice what we preach and blend and have it be a blend of forensics and design/construction, where we can really get bang for the buck for both the employee owner as well as the company.
Right. So it seems like that's, that's certainly developing into an expectation for some of your top people to have that.
Yes.
And,
yeah, and even not, and even those, if it's more of a technician that maybe doesn't have the personality to withstand the heat of a deposition, or maybe doesn't want to teach or do something like that, it's becoming a very skilled technician, and the most skilled technician that you can be, which helps with quality and helps with the advancement of the difficulty of projects that you can work on.
Great. Well, let's switch gears here a little bit. When I was first looking at you and seeing everything that was going on, Denver popped up, and it seems very fitting that you would find a home in Denver. It's a up-and-coming city without a doubt. It's got some old bones to it, but a lot of new and progressive things are happening in Denver, particularly in their transportation, their infill, and Bill, what are you getting out of being in Denver, this very dynamic market?
Well, it's certainly a growth market. I expected to come here and for 6 months in 1998, open an office, and then move on. And here I am 20 years later. We started Vertex in very mature markets, Boston and New York. And then it was in the late 90s where we started to open up in emerging markets, which Denver was one of them. And it's a little bit interesting because I reside here, and being domiciled in Denver when our corporate headquarters is in Boston was a little bit unique in the 2000s, not so much anymore. The trend in the AEC industry is to kind of become home office-less, and you really don't. The goal of larger AEC firms is not to be a U.S. firm or a Canadian firm. It's to be just a global firm and not have that local brand. So at least in North America, that's helped us. And it really, our goal, and really a lot of companies' goals, is to have a regional office platform and then to mature those offices. And it's not easy. And we've been working on that for 25 years, and we're becoming a lot better at it. And you can't simply open offices and have that office be fed work. So our whole push, and you probably noticed from my answers, is local office sustainability.
Sure.
We could probably double or triple in size alone just by regional office infill. So when we marry that organically with an M&A program, that equals significant continued 20+% growth for the next 15 years. So being in Denver, getting back to your question, being in Denver, it's been very exciting just seeing the opportunity, the opportunities you see in markets like this where there's bare land as far as the eye can see that's infilled, but there's still tons of opportunity. And you look at other markets, I guess like Austin, Nashville, maybe Seattle's becoming mature, Portland, but the opportunities when you compare those markets with more mature markets like the larger industrial cities, it is exciting to be in these markets and to see how they can change over a 10 to 20 year period.
Great. Well, that is very exciting. So let's move on to, obviously something that's near and dear to your heart, Bill, is the ESOP that Vertex went through, I think 6 years ago. obviously, in your questionnaire, you were very high on that. But what's the future of this ESOP for your company, and how is it going to continue to fuel your growth and your company culture?
Well, we had opportunities back in 2012 and 13 to sell the company to strategic buyers for a lot more money than what we exited out of through an ESOP. We felt that in the long term, being employee-owned in an Aec Industry is certainly a differentiator. It's worked. It's proven. And you mentioned the question, can you get to $1 billion without perhaps transitioning ownership or going private equity or IPO or some other option, MOE, some other options? I mean, that's something we always need to consider. But in terms of the last 5 years and looking forward, we think it was a great decision to go ESOP. Like I said, it's a differentiator. Everyone's got skin in the game. Everyone gets the reward. It's a long-term wealth generator, which is great. And we've had, when you look at simply the numbers alone, we've had great success. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that everyone is engaged. It furthermore helps with employee retention and recruitment. So it's nothing but good things to say. The tax cuts, corporate tax cuts, certainly caused a little bit of a disadvantage for us because that was our extreme advantage. So when there is corporate tax cuts, that advantage shrinks. But nonetheless, it continues to be great. And like I said, nothing but good things to say.
Sure, and based on my experience reporting and writing in the industry, I'm not actually an engineer myself, but are firms trending towards this ESOP business model?
I don't think so. Okay. I think the trend, the clear trend in the industry is consolidation. We now have an IPO market that was dormant for many years. Now it's back. And we've had PE money being introduced into the system. And we're seeing an unprecedented amount of consolidation. So we're seeing most exits through the bigger getting bigger. And a lot of the middle market firms are getting snapped up. The smaller firms are still fragmented. And in terms, we don't see, at least in our M&A, because we look at a lot of small firms. We're not a $1 billion company. We don't look at 500-person firms necessarily to acquire. So we look at a lot of smaller firms, and it's very rare that we bump into ESOPs. And maybe that's because they don't want to sell and that system is working. But I would have to look at the numbers to see if there's an upward trend in it. But my gut feel tells me that not necessarily.
Okay, fair enough. And Lisa, I want to bring you into this conversation real quick, and I think Bill will appreciate this. As the head of the marketing for a firm like Vertex that is aggressive, that is a growth firm, that is diversified across their service offerings and geographically, what's the big challenge for you and your team to let people know what Vertex is all about?
Honestly, I think really one of the challenges we're facing every day is just internal communications. And as you can imagine, this is a very entrepreneurial spirited company. And there's a lot of growth in a lot of different areas, a lot of different markets. But there's also still a keen focus on key initiatives that we want to make sure are underlying in all of the growth that is going on. So in general, trying to not only maintain an entrepreneurial spirit and maintain a growth focus, it's to keep everyone moving in the same direction and making sure that our core values and mission are part of what every office has. So that I think is one of our challenges. As an external communicator too to our clients and prospects, that, that message comes out often, so that's a little easier. But like to keep it internal and keep also that message of core, core values of, always adding value, always maintaining urgency, embracing a lifetime of learning, and maintaining sort of that type of message to our employees and our prospects and clients has been what we've been focused on.
Great, thank you, Bill. You've got some muscle power on the marketing side, so it's refreshing to see. The responsiveness definitely shows. So anyway, good. And now let's also look at this whole thing about the acquisition process, Bill. And reading through your answers, it seems like you guys have a pretty strong playbook about how you go about doing this and kind of setting those parameters on the front end so you don't have too many hiccups on the back end. But how long did it take you to get that playbook together? I mean, how much trial and error went into that?
Tons, and it's work in progress. And it's we're learning as we're going because we really, a decade ago, we had very little experience with M&A. We may have done 1 or 2 deals, but as we've done many more, we're becoming better at it. And we understand that integration is critical proper integration is critical to long-term success. So we're trying to, and Lisa's been very helpful here in providing a roadmap for us, is particularly on the marketing and business development side, and internal communication side, is map everything out, or get a very solid roadmap before we finalize our deal, so everyone's on the same page in terms of timeline and how the integration will work. And I think I mentioned in my answer, Ben Strong, our COO, he's been really instrumental in pushing this ball, because a lot of times it's like, hey, let's get the deal done. You get the deal done, and then you move on to the next deal. Well, that really doesn't work all that well. So we're really pushing to integrate, collaborate, and make sure that things go as planned and that they're predictable, and we eliminate surprises, most of the surprises, as we can, or that is possible to do so.
Right, and figuratively speaking, you've probably had to land on a couple of grenades over the years, right?
Yes, we have. And it's funny, going into the deal, we probably have had low expectations on the ones that did turn out to be grenades. So we get a better, we think a gut check is really important. And we've actually pulled out of several deals just because it didn't feel right. We didn't think culturally it was going to be a good fit, even though a lot of times, as you know, more than anyone, you can invest a lot of time in months and months, if not years, in trying to get deals done. And sometimes it's not going to happen, and you pull the plug, and it's the best thing it's a great thing.
Right, and I think that's a strong message for any up-and-coming CEOs out there who are thinking about an M&A deal, is that, you have all these issues going on, but sometimes it's got to feel right.
It's got to feel right, yes. And if it doesn't, a lot of times your gut is, I'm not going to say 100% right, but it's well over 50%, I would say.
Right. Well, Bill, looking over your response, you're certainly a global thinker. And I don't think that anyone could call you anything other than that. And with that said, what are, using your global perspective, what are some of the big threats to the AEC industry?
Well, you have, there's certainly global threats that are you flip on the news even this morning, and you talk about currency manipulation, and you talk about tariffs and and even immigration issues that are affecting international relations. That all has a direct impact on, let's say, U.S. companies doing business elsewhere, and that impacts AEC firms. So that's something that's really out of the AEC industry's control. So you got to watch out for that. So it is, like we talked about office sustainability, local office sustainability. It's, as I mentioned in my answer, it's also critical to get these international offices to be sustainable locally in order for it to work and be predictable over the long term. Ignoring global markets, I don't want to say is ignorant, but it's ignoring huge, massive markets. And we're seeing a lot of international firms come in and buy up a lot of U.S. firms now. There's a lot of dry powder out there that's looking to source deals. We get a lot of calls on larger AEC firms that are looking for a U.S. platform. So we identified fairly young, within the first 10 years, the need to expand globally. And it's been great for us. I think it improves our brand, and it introduces us into new markets and large markets, not as large as the U.S. But thank you. If we're going to think about that moving forward, you can't ignore it.
Right, and so let's go back to the early days for you, Bill. You know, you've been in construction, and you know, you went to school for engineering, and so you go way back. But let's talk about, you know, your career it's been a great career, but you can say that about a lot of people. They've had a great career, but not everyone has all degrees, and you know, there's a distinct flavor that your career has taken on. And looking back from when you were young, how much of this kind of developed organically, and how much was this part of your plan that you put together?
Well, the plan to start a business was developed at a very early age. My father had a company, and I originally thought, perhaps in high school, that I was just going to go into the family business. And I decided not long thereafter that I kind of wanted to forge my own path. So in college, I definitely, I knew at that age that I wanted to start a great company. And so that was always there. And so that's the main reason why I started the company at age 25, or co-founded the company at age 25 or 26. Jeff Picard was similarly situated, and I think he was 25 and I was 26, and Jim may have been 28 or so. In terms of the degrees, that came at a later stage. That was probably 10 years after I graduated. I got my PE. So I waited because I was opening up all these offices and running around the country and working 24 hours a day. But then I knew that I needed to kind of take a step back, get my professional engineering license, and then decided on a 10-year plan or so to get a master's degree, and then go to law school. And then I went to a program at MIT for a couple years, and then PhD. And it was, so I'd say around 2005 or so, or maybe even the late 90s with the MIT program, that really got me started with advanced degrees and having an appreciation for a lifetime of learning.
Right. Well, you know, it's funny, as a side note, you know, I know some people that are very successful in their field, but they'll admit to me, they're like, I don't read, you know, and, you know, once they got their degree and got into their field and became very proficient in their field, they don't, you know, not a whole lot really comes in from the outside, and I always kind of feel like that's odd. But, you know, that's one of the things that I really appreciate you, is that you refuse to let that wall build up. You know, you continue to learn things. And I'm sure that,
Well,
go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah, I think the one thing that I wanted to do is set an example too for the company. I wanted to our whole thing at Vertex is practicing what we preach. And that too is a differentiator where we offer the forensic expertise as experts in the field, but in order to be an expert, you need to design or construct so you can offer reliable opinions. Similarly, I didn't want to push this lifetime of learning program without doing it myself. And so I thought it was important to lead by example there.
Sure. And now Vertex is up to 500 people, correct?
Yes.
So you're not a mega firm necessarily, but you're certainly not one of the mom and pop local shingle engineering firms. So I'm sure you rub elbows with the CH2Ms and the Jacobs and, all the AECom and all that. And, you can be competitors and you can have friendly competitors and all that. How do you navigate the landscape from your vantage point now that, you are dealing with these very big, powerful engineering firms that can win contracts left and right?
Yeah, the larger firms have certainly more of a public presence. They get the $100 million plus projects from the federal government and states. We compete more on the private sector work. We understand moving forward we are going to need to compete more on a federal program level, and in fact, federal work is really picking up right now. And our latest acquisition was in the public space, or a company focused in the private sector, or public sector rather. So we do find we're kind of a tweener right now. We're not a mom and pop, and we're not a behemoth. And the industry is really made up of one or the other. And there's really one firm that can make it from our level to $1 billion level per decade. When you look past the last few decades, you see these firms like Stantec in the early 90s went from 100 or a couple $100 million up to multi-billion dollars. We're trying to follow that path. And that's going to be done through organic growth, M&A growth, and really entering those public marketplaces where we can get that larger backlog work. So we do have a roadmap to get us there, but we are in, I don't want to say no man's land, but we are a 500 plus person firm. We're not a 10,000 plus person firm. And getting our way up to that level is going to be a real fun challenge for us.
Good. So looking for more public work.
Yes, we're going to have to expand our public work platform, both design and construction management. We don't want to get into the at-risk construction. That usually doesn't bode all that well for AC firms. We like the program management work and owner's rep work and the design work. And we see there's so much pent-up demand for public construction right now. It's been, it's been flat for a decade, and now it's up 10% this year or 9% year to date. It is rebounding, and it's rebounding hard, and it's great to see. But you look at the larger firms, they've still, over the last decade, from 06 to 16, when 17 on the public works kind of eked up a little bit, and now it's really ramping up. They were able to perform just fine. But we certainly, if we are going to get to that $1 billion level, we do need to enter those markets more so than we are now. And concurrently, we need to improve our private sector work. But we've got a pretty darn good stronghold in private sector work right now. Right.
And one of the things that you talked about was, that's going to happen at some point in time. There's going to be some type of correction in the market. There's going to be some type of slowdown in the market. Going what we all went through, 10 years ago still gives me nightmares. But you seem pretty confident that what's coming ahead can be handled properly. And let's talk about that. You know, looking ahead at the economy with the possibility of some type of bear market coming up, Bill. No one really wants to talk about it, but what's your perspective on that?
Oh, I welcome it. I almost can't wait for it. It's been too long coming. We're into our 10 years of a bull market. They talk about flat inflation, and that's just simply not the case in construction. There has been massive inflation in construction. Development deals aren't penciling anymore because of dirt costs and construction costs. And not to mention that, you talk to the larger AECOMs and Vantex and Tetra Techs and all those other larger folks. I mean, the only way they're getting resources is stealing from one another.
Yeah.
It'll be nice to have that ease. And we're in a situation where we do have a forensic practice that actually performs very well in bear markets. So we're not, you know, we don't really necessarily have to do too much to prepare for a bear market. We transition a lot of our design resources over to our forensic pool. So we're able to level our resources quite nicely. And I really like our strategy as it relates to cycles in the marketplace. But it is inevitable. We're seeing the global economy slow right now. We had a great year last year in the U.S. It's slowing right now. Everyone knows it. I think this recession is going to be a minor blip. The only issue is that the Fed can't do too much because rates are already so darn low. So there isn't much. There's not too many tools that they have to correct the economy. They can print more money, but you know, we got the Fed funds rate still at lows. They did tick it up a quarter point in this last December. They just dropped it. They'll probably drop it again. But really, we're hovering close to zero again. So that's the only thing that's concerning, is that they don't have 2 to 3% that they can drop to really rev up the economy. So that's the little bit of the differentiator that we face in this recession. So while I think it will be mild in terms of a percent drop in GDP, I think it may be a little bit prolonged, only because we're going to need to work it out without really having interest rates drop all that much.
But you seem to think what I'm getting, some of what you welcome is it'll ease some of that construction inflation, perhaps.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And we're seeing, you know, we're seeing oil prices that have jumped from 30 to 65, and now they're easing back. But we've seen just significant cost increases, a lot in labor, because we have the same labor pool, at least in construction. We have actually less people working in construction as we did 10 to 13 years ago, and they're working more hours. They're getting paid more because they're of high demand. Subcontractors are charging more. And so when things pencil, there's not too much room for contingency, and disputes arise. And we're seeing a whole lot of that over the last couple of years. And the frequency is really ticking up. So I think I welcome a little correction just to kind of ease those issues and get us back into a place where there's room to grow, there's resources, inflation is pulled back. But they do talk about the CPI is flat and it's 2% or below 2%. You know, I don't care what they say. In construction, costs have gone up considerably. You call any developer and ask them what the prices were per square foot 5 years ago with what they were last year, and it's not going to be 2% year over year. It's going to be a lot more than that.
Right. Well, yeah, I definitely, and that's your MBA talking. I mean, you know the numbers. You follow this and have a deep understanding of it.
Yeah, I keep a very close eye on it for several reasons. It is determinant on capital expenditures internally. We want to know where the economy is going to be moving over the next couple of years, we certainly, on the M&A front, we need to know where to deploy our resources and capital. We want to deploy them into markets that have room for growth over the next 4 years, because if we pay a 4 or 5x for a company, we're banking on the company meeting or exceeding those EBIT goals over the next 5 years in order for us to get a reasonable return on our investments. And in order to do that, we can maximize our return by investing in growth markets. So, for instance, in design markets, we're a little bit hesitant now because we do see a pullback in the private sector work. So if we're deploying capital into design companies that work predominantly in private sectors, that might not be a great investment. Where, on the other hand, we feel bullish on forensic companies and forensic work. So we're really, as we sit here today, we're more focused on deploying our capital into the forensic space. But when the recession hits, we want to go in full force and really buy up as many design firms as we can.
Oh, okay. Wow. So that's definitely that's in the program.
It is very much so. So where, like I said, where we're deploying our capital is very much contingent on where we think the economy is moving and trending towards. We've created algorithms and derivatives and slopes to try to predict the next 24 months to help us figure out where we can get the biggest bang for our buck.
Fascinating. Well, you had spoken about, the South, I believe the Southwest and even the Southeast as areas that have been good to your firm in the last 10 years.
Yes, that's where the population's moving. That's where a lot of construction has happened over the past decade, where you've had kind of lower growth in the more mature markets, Florida, Texas. We're looking to get into Arizona and then some of the Northwest markets that have really grown over the last 20 years. So we've seen a lot of growth there. And there's a lot of growth internally. We still have a lot of room for growth there. Like I said, if we just simply focused on infilling our regional offices, we could probably triple in size. So that's something that we're really focused on.
Right. Well, Bill, I know you're busy, so let's go into the wrap-up phase of this interview, which I think has been dynamite so far, by the way. What else do you have to say, that I haven't asked you about? I mean, what do you think needs to be said in this interview?
Well, maybe overall, we talked about resources, AEC resources. We have seen enrollment in engineering programs slow over the years. So I think moving forward, it will be a little bit of a challenge getting qualified engineers. There will be a fight for resources, so differentiators are the key to survival. In technology, we haven't seen any, in construction at least, there's been no efficiency gains over the last 100 years. It still takes the same amount of resources and same amount of time to build a building as it does today as it did 100 years ago. However, we're at a tipping point where we're seeing self-driving equipment, at least on horizontal work. We're seeing companies like Kiewit really take advantage of new technology and using drones for surveying and using self-operating equipment. And I think we're really at a point in time where we're finally realizing efficiency gains based on technological advances. And when we see everyone getting on board with Revit, sub-consultants and architects working together with contractors, I think design is going to be greatly improved. I think we are really positioned for efficiency gains over the next 10 years. And it's going to be important for AEC firms to really be on the right side of the curve, to be ahead of the curve, not behind the curve. Because if you are ahead of the curve, there's going to be tremendous opportunity moving forward.
Great, great. Well, Bill, it's been fantastic talking with you today.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you
Yeah,
for your time.
Lisa, I appreciate you helping us get all this put together. And I've got all this recorded, so we're going to have a great piece of collateral. And look forward to seeing you guys in Las Vegas in October.
Great. Sounds good.
Thank
you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.